If you walk down certain streets in the city of Compton today, you might actually think you've stepped into, like, the ultimate urban success story.
Oh, absolutely. The visual shift is pretty striking.
Right. I mean, you'd see these shiny new quartz countertops and flipped houses, and you'd hear the heavy machinery of, like, massive new infrastructure projects breaking ground.
Yeah, the commercial real estate is moving fast.
Exactly. The business permits are being filed left and right, and the overall narrative buzzing around Los Angeles County right now is just that Compton is the next great city on the rise.
But then, you look at the city's baseline poverty metrics, and you would think absolutely nothing has changed in 30 years.
Which is wild.
It's the ultimate tension between facade and reality. I mean, we are so drawn to those dramatic before and after photos of a city reinventing itself. But we rarely pause to ask if the economic foundation is actually sound enough to support the people who already live there.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you are joining us because we are pulling apart this massive shift happening in Compton right now.
It's a huge topic.
It really is, because for decades, this is a city that has been globally recognized. I mean, it is a cultural powerhouse, but it's also been, synonymous with economic struggle, systemic disinvestment, and pretty serious public safety challenges.
Right, but now the headlines are completely flipping. The capital is flowing in.
But we want to know what is actually happening behind the drywall,
Which is the core mission of our exploration today. We are looking past the flashy, optimistic press releases to answer a really critical question.
Right, the big one.
Is this transformation in Compton real, equitable, and sustainable? Or is this just like a fresh coat of economic paint masking much deeper systemic issues that have been left completely unaddressed?
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to truly understand the magnitude of this current pivot, we first have to establish the historical baseline.
Yeah, you have to know what came before.
Exactly. We have to know what this community is actually building on top of. And the history of Compton is incredibly layered.
It is. If you rewind the clock far enough, its early days were actually defined by a thriving agricultural community.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it was genuinely prosperous. But that era was eventually followed by decades of profound structural disinvestment.
Right.
We were talking about severe economic decline and systemic barriers that basically locked entire neighborhoods out of traditional wealth-building opportunities.
So it wasn't just a sudden drop-off?
No, not at all. The social unrest and the public safety challenges that eventually made global headlines, they were not spontaneous. They were the direct, predictable results of deep-seated systemic neglect.
You cannot just ignore that past, and you certainly can't, pave over it.
Absolutely not.
But there is this massive pivot happening right now. The city is actively attempting to reshape its entire identity.
Yeah, the focus has turned really aggressively toward local economic development, cultural empowerment, and localized public safety.
And this isn't just, an arbitrary mandate coming from top-level politicians. It's this really complex mix of grassroots neighborhood efforts, local leadership initiatives, and, a massive surge of new outside investment.
Which brings a lot of competing interests to the table.
Definitely. There's a statement from community leader Miller Martin that I think captures the current mood perfectly. He says, quote, "Compton is poised to grow and be a great place for business. We just have to have a greater vision."
And that highlights the absolute necessity for strategic, forward-thinking planning.
Right.
You cannot capitalize on raw potential without a definitive roadmap. Unchecked growth without a vision is just chaos.
It's kind of like a legendary artist, right? Someone who had a highly publicized, turbulent early career, but now they're using those exact same struggles to, create their absolute masterpiece.
That's a great way to look at it.
But wait, I do have a little pushback here. A greater vision sounds amazing on a bumper sticker or, in a pitch deck.
Yeah.
But whose vision are we actually talking about here? I mean, if millions of dollars are pouring in, is this the vision of the outside venture capitalists and real estate developers bringing in that capital?
That's the danger.
Right. Or is it the vision of the people who have lived in Compton for 3 generations? Because if you are painting a masterpiece, you need to make sure everyone in the community actually wants that painting in their living room.
What's fascinating here is how the city is actually attempting to answer that very question.
Okay.
They're leaning heavily into their most famous export, which is their culture. Compton possesses massive global cultural influence, particularly in music, entertainment, and the arts.
Oh, without a doubt.
But for a long time, that culture was something extracted and exported to the rest of the world The world consumed it, but the profits largely left the city.
Right. The money didn't stay local.
Exactly. But now there's a deliberate strategy to leverage that cultural power internally.
How does that actually work in practice, though? Like, how do you turn cultural influence into an economic vision?
Well, you use it to build infrastructure for the next generation.
Okay.
Rather than just celebrating the artists who made it out, the focus is on fueling local mentorship programs, building production facilities, and creating platforms that empower young residents to own their intellectual property.
No, that's huge. Ownership is everything.
It is. They are trying to ensure that the vision and the wealth it generates comes from within the community. But transforming that historical pain into tangible progress requires directly addressing the root causes of the past struggles.
Right. You can't just throw up a new art center and expect generational poverty to vanish overnight.
Precise.
Which brings us to the tangible reality of the situation. Because, grassroots energy, artistic empowerment, a unified vision, that's all incredibly exciting.
It's a great start.
But if you are listening to this and wondering if Compton is truly the next city on the rise, you need more than just a good narrative. We have to move from anecdotal optimism to concrete metrics. We need the data.
We do.
Yeah.
And the data presents a fascinating, almost split-screen picture of what is happening on the ground right now.
Let's look at the positive indicators first, because they are pretty significant.
They really are.
Investment in infrastructure projects is actively spiking. And that means physical improvements to the city and, the creation of new jobs.
Yep.
On top of that, small business ownership is increasing, which is a fantastic indicator of a growing entrepreneurial spirit taking root locally.
Definitely a good sign.
And perhaps most crucially for the long-term health of the city, high school graduation rates are actually climbing.
Those are undeniable markers of progress. I mean, they represent physical, economic, and educational growth.
But it's that split screen you mentioned.
Right. Because when you pan over to the lingering negative data, a totally different reality persists.
Yeah.
The poverty rates in Compton remain stubbornly high, and severe income disparities, along with unequal access to fundamental resources, continue to heavily plague the community.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because those two sets of data seem entirely contradictory.
They do.
Like, if infrastructure is booming, if new jobs are being created, and if small business ownership is up, where is that money actually going? Because the poverty line hasn't budged.
It's a paradox.
It really makes me think of, a leaky bucket. Is all this new economic water pouring into the city, but it's just evaporating before it can actually circulate?
That's exactly what's happening.
Are outside contractors getting these massive infrastructure jobs while the generational poverty remains completely untouched?
You are hitting on the fundamental mechanics of urban economics right there. Macro-level city growth almost always outpaces micro-level household prosperity.
Okay, break that down for me.
Let's look at your leaky bucket. Imagine the city secures funding for a $50 million infrastructure project to repave roads and upgrade public transit.
Sounds great on paper.
Right. That $50 million hits the city's macro ledger immediately. The GDP of the city technically goes up, but who is actually getting paid?
Often, it's like a massive regional contracting firm headquartered 3 towns over.
Exactly. The city pays that firm. The firm brings in its own specialized workers.
Right.
Now, those workers might buy a sandwich at a local deli on their lunch break, which is a tiny micro boost. But at 5 o'clock, they drive back to a different county.
And they spend their paychecks there.
Yes. They pay their property taxes there.
Yeah.
The wealth completely bypasses the local residents. The systemic issues causing high poverty rates in Compton do not disappear just because a new road is paved.
Wow. And I guess the climbing graduation rates have to follow a similar logic, right?
They do.
Because that is a massive achievement for the school districts. But an 18-year-old walking across the stage with a diploma today doesn't just, magically print a paycheck tomorrow.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, there is a profound time lag.
Ah, okay.
A higher graduation rate today won't translate into higher household incomes until those graduates enter the workforce, establish careers, and start building wealth over the next decade.
That takes time.
It takes a lot of time. That is why we cannot just look at the raw data in a vacuum. We have to examine these macro data points alongside the qualitative day-to-day reality of the residents who are actually living through this awkward transition period.
And when you listen to those residents, that glaring discrepancy between the rising business metrics and the stubborn poverty, it naturally leads to the community's greatest, most existential fear.
the displacement fear.
Right.
Yeah.
Who is this new Compton actually being built for?
And that is the defining tension of any modern urban revitalization. It is driving significant, highly organized local activism right now across the city.
Yeah, residents aren't just sitting back and watching the cranes go up. They are actively demanding transparency and accountability from their local government.
They want a seat at the table.
Exactly. They are calling for inclusive decision-making processes. They want to ensure that the benefits of all this new growth are shared equitably.
Right.
Specifically, they are pushing for policies that protect affordable housing and provide tangible support for existing local small businesses.
Because they are deeply afraid of the gentrification trap.
Yeah.
The terrifying reality that new development will simply push out the longtime residents who actually weathered the decades of disinvestment.
It is so much like living in a family home that desperately needs repairs, you know? For years, you've wanted the plumbing to work, you've wanted the roof to stop leaking.
And then you finally get the investments to fix it up.
Yes. But once the shiny new paint is on and the foundation is secured, the property taxes skyrocket, the neighborhood value goes up, and suddenly your family can't afford to live in the very house you just spent decades trying to save.
You get evicted from your own success story.
Which is devastating. And it makes me wonder, is growth without displacement actually possible? Or is Compton just doomed to repeat the exact same mistakes we've seen in other rapidly rising cities?
This raises an important question, and we actually have real-world comparative analysis to help us understand the landscape here.
Oh.
Compton's story is not happening in isolation. If we look at two other major cities that have walked this exact path, Oakland, California, and Atlanta, Georgia, we can see the mechanisms of what happens when growth outpaces community protection.
Two cities that experienced absolutely massive transformations, but with very different, equally complicated outcomes. Let's start with Oakland.
Okay, so Oakland, much like Compton, has a rich, deeply rooted history and experienced a massive cultural renaissance. It became a huge hub for the arts.
Right.
But it also sat right next to Silicon Valley. So when the tech boom happened, the spillover effect hit Oakland hard.
Oh, I see.
Highly paid tech workers needed housing, and developers rushed in to build it. But because Oakland lacked aggressive early tenant protections and commercial rent caps, the result was extreme gentrification.
The landlords realized they could double their rents.
Exactly. The culture thrived. It became a highly desirable place to live. But the widespread displacement of its historic communities was just devastating. Many of the people who built the culture of Oakland were physically forced out.
So that is the danger of proximity to outside wealth without guardrails. But then there is Atlanta, which took a slightly different path.
Yeah, Atlanta actively courted explosive economic and corporate growth. They offered massive corporate tax incentives to bring Fortune 500 headquarters to the city.
They wanted to be the Southern powerhouse.
And they succeeded. But that economic boom brought with it severe, crippling income inequality.
How does that happen, though? I mean, if you bring in massive corporations, shouldn't that create jobs for everyone?
Well, it creates jobs, but it creates a highly polarized job market. The corporations brought in thousands of highly specialized six-figure jobs, and they often imported outside talent to fill them.
Oh, right.
Meanwhile, the jobs created for the local existing population were largely low-wage service and hospitality jobs to support that new corporate class.
Wow.
The wealth was generated locally, but it was highly concentrated at the very top. This created a massive affordable housing crisis because the real estate market catered to the new six-figure earners, leaving the service workers completely priced out of their own city.
So neither of those cities managed to plug the leaky bucket. Oakland displaced its culture creators, and Atlanta created a massive wealth gap.
Exactly.
They got the shiny new facade, but the foundation cracked in entirely new ways. I mean, if you're listening to this and thinking, hey, I've heard this exact same promise about my own city before, you aren't wrong. The playbook is pretty well documented.
It is. And what this comparative analysis underscores is that Compton's baseline situation isn't entirely unique,
Right.
but its outcome could be. The only way to avoid the pitfalls of Oakland and Atlanta is through aggressive, community-driven, equitable development policies.
Let's break that down, because equitable development policies can sound like a lot of, urban planning jargon. What does that actually mean for the people on the ground?
It means you cannot just welcome unchecked outside investment and hope the wealth magically trickles down.
That never works.
Right. You have to build the guardrails first. Practically, that looks like implementing community benefits agreements, or CBAs. If a developer wants to build a massive new mixed-use complex in Compton, a CBA legally requires them to hire a certain percentage of local residents for the construction and permanent jobs.
So you legally force the money to stay in the local ecosystem.
Precisely.
Okay.
It also means establishing community land trusts, where the neighborhood actually owns the land beneath new affordable housing developments.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, it permanently caps how high rents can spike, regardless of what the broader market does. You have to legally engineer the equity into the zoning laws before the first shovel even hits the dirt.
Which means we have to look ahead. You
Yeah.
know, having explored the historical context, the conflicting data, and those glaring cautionary warnings from Oakland and Atlanta, we need to shift our focus to the immediate future.
Absolutely.
For you listening right now, if you want to know if Compton is actually going to succeed in becoming the next great city on the rise, what are the actual signposts you need to be watching for?
The coming months and years for Compton's leadership are just critical. First, keep a close eye on those major development projects.
Yeah.
When a massive contract is awarded, look at the fine print. Who is actually getting the contracts, and are there legally binding community benefits tied to those developments?
That's a huge one.
Second, look at the public safety initiatives. Are they rooted in community engagement and social support, or is it just like a massive increase in punitive enforcement simply to make outside investors feel more comfortable?
And you also have to monitor the implementation of those protective policies we just talked about.
Exactly.
Are they actually putting legal protections in place for affordable housing? Are there tangible financial lifelines like low-interest local grants or commercial rent stabilization being extended to existing small businesses?
So they can actually compete against the massive new outside chains that are inevitably going to move in.
Right. You have to keep watching the vital signs of the community. I mean, the graduation rates are great, but are the crime statistics dropping naturally through better community health?
Yeah.
And most importantly, are the median income levels of the long-term existing residents actually rising?
That's the real metric.